From a legacy perspective, we tell our stories for ourselves as a gift to future generations. Stories of our people connect the past and the present to the future. Our stories and our learning from them honor and respect our ancestors and can awaken future generations to their potential. Welcome to Our People. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. The story of how a man, assisted by his wife and children, built a business here in historic Spikestown, connected with people, and through this business and their giving and sharing, they fulfilled a need in the lives of hundreds of people during their time. The story of the late Vallis Jemmott involvement in business begins now. The story is carried by his three children. The eldest, Debbie, begins by placing things in the correct perspective.
Right, so I'm standing in front of the Clarence Jemmott building, formerly Jemmott's Variety, and we renamed it earlier this year after my grandfather, Clarence Jemmott, who had a number of stores in the north of the island, Indian Ground, Connaught Town, mile and a quarter. And at the point in time when my father Vallis Jemmott left Allen Arthur, he was trying to decide what he wanted to do. And three of his siblings had emigrated, and he was trying to decide if that was what he wanted to do. And when he was overseas, his father called and said, there's a property in Spikestown available for sale. Would you be interested? And he decided, well, yes, and he preferred to be in Barbados. When we look back at the deeds, he purchased it from Clifford Jordan in 1964. And then two other pieces were purchased in 1967 and the final piece in 1975. So when it started, one door,
and it would go right down almost to the salt pond. I remember living above the store and having to come down all the time to work. Of course, we sold a variety of things. We sold a lot of toiletries and a lot of gift sets. So at Christmas time, we were known for coming for gift sets. We would have sold things like food stuff, but nothing like, nothing perishable. More canned stuff and that.
Everything except groceries and alcohol. Because that was one of his very strict rules. He would not sell alcohol and he would not open on Sundays.
Now, we're speaking of a time when this town was very different from what it is now. The social and commercial activities of the people of the North revolved around this historic town. How did Jemmott's Variety fit into that social and commercial space?
And I remember on Friday, Spikestown was a total hive of activity because persons, the factories in St. Lucie, all the sugarcane workers in the area would come down to spend their money, and there was all that hive of activity, persons trying to get things for their family for the week or so. And it was exciting in the sense of we were working in the store and persons would come in and you have all sorts of characters and persons encourage and say, all right, don't take up nothing because Mr. Jemmott ain't gonna lock me up. Telling their children, scolding their children if they take up a sweetie without the parents knowing. And it was that character of Spikestown that came out in those days.
We were also known for a lot of hardware stuff, a lot of household items. There are a lot of people who would say that during Christmas or during the summer vacation, they would come from areas all over the Barbados, come down to Spikestown, come into stores like Jemmott's or World Jemmott and find things that were unusual that they wouldn't normally find any other place.
I would be dating myself, but I remember weighing sweets and biscuits and methylated spirits. I remember getting a van license so that we could bring down biscuits, packed down from Ribisco down to Spikestown and wherever else we had to go.
The youngest sibling, Vallis, describes his father's style and operation of the business and how he ensured that he got the best price for everything in an attempt to pass on that saving to the consumer. You will learn of the importance of networking and how the father ensured that the three siblings were intimately involved in the business.
He was very thrifty. A lot of persons would say very cheap. And but he was wise with his money. He liked nice things, and there's some things that he would buy that were, you would say that they were fairly expensive, but he would try to make sure that he tried to get the best cost for everything. So even groceries, we would get our groceries from the store. So then he would say that, you know, the fact that we are getting those things from the store means that we were getting it 30 or 40% less than if you were going into some place. So then he would use all of his contacts if he wanted to buy a fridge or a stove or something. So he would always use his contacts to see how he can best get a wholesale price. So those are tidbits of wisdom that he has passed on.
Well, we used to tease my father about getting free labor. Anyone who has worked, who has parents who owned a store, know that you used to work in the store just as much as the persons who got paid. So vacations were spent in the store.
From the time I was 7 years old, I was working in the store until I remember the first time since I was 7 that I had a Saturday that I just lay down in my bed and did absolutely nothing was when it was final year at university. Every Saturday we had to come down, work in the store. If I had to go out or do something with church, it was okay, but I was not staying home and relaxing while there was work to be done. So I always had to work, and that work ethic has taken me through my life.
At that time, we lived above the store, so that was even, you understand, people would knock at any time, and we would go downstairs and serve them.
I do recall as a child that window there, there is actually a seat there, and we would look through that window and we would look out and we would see all the people in Spikestown. Of course, this way was a two-way street at the time.
The vans used to come up Church Street, and I remember Champ as one of the bus drivers, and that time when they had the entrance of the minibus would have been at the back, and there was a pole in the middle that if one side was go, that you would come down, you swing around, go up the other side. And at that time, Spikestown was a hive of activity. The bus stand nearby, girls' school, Spikestown boys' school, and persons coming in, there were a lot of hawkers all over the place, and Spikestown was that hive of activity.
And there was a lot of excitement, so we would look out and see, well, the fishermen coming down, we would see the people coming, whether it were people quarreling, we heard some words that we wouldn't normally hear, but it was a lot of excitement. I mean, that was, I guess, our excitement to look outside and see what was happening, even when we were in the store. There were several characters in Spikestown. For sure, I remember as a little girl, there was a lady who used to sell all those old-time sweets in the Esplanade. She used to sell like the comforts and the sugar cane and those kind of old-time sweets that she made. We actually still know her grandchildren who are friends of us at this point in time. Then there were, who else they had?
It was Shagoff.
Right, Shagoff. Shagoff was known for, he was the kind of vagrant of today, of yesterday, but she would come in Spikestown and go behind people and make some noises and surprise them. Of course, there were a lot of characters in the fish market. A lot of fishermen, a lot of persons who sold fish. These were characters.
Right, those are, and well, of course the hawkers. There was Millie, who's the fish market in Western is named after. So there are persons who added color to your everyday life.
Yes, yes.
That color, that magic, the life and energy of Spikestown. Now, let us go back to the store and hear how his involvement in the family's business provided him with a skill beyond what is traditionally taught in the classroom. So much so that he was able to grasp managerial, financial, and accounting concepts easily while pursuing his tertiary education.
Working at the store was one of those cases where even when I was at university, I always worked at the store. So I will come, work in the morning, and then go to university in the afternoon. And it has always been one of those things that it taught me the business side of things. So when persons at university, I went to university doing management, and this was the first time I was doing accounts. So because I had the exposure to the store, it came natural to me. So there are a lot of things that came natural because I grew up in the business setting. So things like accounting, the marketing, I was like, oh, so this is what we do. So those are a lot of things that came natural. And even like when I was doing my professional accounting qualifications, and we had a lot of cases, and it was almost like it came natural to me more than most because that was the environment I grew up in, that was the environment I was exposed to.
I also remember we were known for things like kites. So when it was time for kite season, we would sell a lot of kites, stationery.
Christmas Eve, when everyone else went home, we sent home the staff, and we were the ones finishing up when people ran in at 8 o'clock at night.
So at Christmas time, we would sell a lot of toys, cards, Christmas gifts.
I always remember one man coming in there and buying 3 cards, and we used to help them choose them, and he bought one for my darling wife, a loving sweetheart, and to one I love. And we were sure that they're not going to the same person. So these persons used to come and buy all sorts of things to teachers, but we always knew that which ones would sell fast and which ones would not sell as fast. So, you know, the granddaughters and the grandmothers would sell fast. The sons-in-laws would sell fast, but the daughter-in-laws, they used to sell as fast. So we had to like choose, because I used to go down Trinidad and buy a lot of postcards and bring them up in a suitcase and sell. So we had to be specific and say, okay, all right, you know, we want to have a grandchild that is an adult, a grandchild that is a child, a thing, or you forget the daughter-in-laws, because those don't really sell at all. I think I bought a whole set of daughter-in-law cards, and Daddy was most upset. And it was like, so those things are the business things that you will pick up. I didn't realize it then, but those are things that will take you and help you understand marketing and what the customer wants.
This is not taught in any university. It is called hands-on experience. The little nuggets of truth that you learn from interacting with people, consumers' patterns and habits, their preferences. It is about the provision of goods and services to our people and the importance of understanding your consumer. We have heard it time and time again. Do not let your right hand know what your left hand is doing. This was practiced by their father, Vallis Jemmott.
And he was very, very generous. But he would not let anyone know of his generosity.
People have spoken about how my father allowed them to come and get stuff and did not come back to pay. They would trust, as they call it. We had this book and we would write down what they owe, and when they get money, they would come and pay. Of course, some people might not have had the wherewithal to pay, and if they didn't have the wherewithal to pay, they would have, my parents would have given.
I heard more stories of what he did for people after he died than when he was alive. Recently, a couple months ago, I met someone at a gas station and looked at me and said, "Jemmott?" He said, "Yes," because I'm accustomed that persons know me, that I have no idea who they are. And he said that he went to Corjam Parry, and his mother used to come in the store a lot, and his father and my father helped his mother a lot in terms of getting groceries. Sometimes she didn't have the money, and he would allow her to trust it, and then she would come back and pay. But he was always there, more or less encouraged. And that's something that those shopkeepers in those days, they literally raised the village.
Interestingly enough, the story of the small shops is celebrated in Chapter 5 of Notes of a Native Governor General by retired Principal Alwyn Adams. While not being specifically mentioned, the good work and contribution of the late Vallis Jemmott is in a sense celebrated in that book. The humanitarian efforts of the shopkeepers detailed therein could easily be used to describe the late Vallis Jemmott.
he was very generous, and he would allow persons to trust things, and some persons, a lot of persons came back and paid, but some didn't, and it didn't worry him. It was like, okay, you know what, I always just want enough for me to eat, have a shelter, be able to take care of my children, educate them, and I'm satisfied. So his satisfaction level, other persons will say that, okay, I will try to get this and all these, accumulate all these other things, but he was quite satisfied, quite contented with his life and everything he did. And he was one of those persons that was totally satisfied.
While my father was a businessman, my mother was obviously behind him all the way. She was a very motherly kind of person, so she would always be talking to the children that come into the store, trying to encourage them to be good, and of course as a Christian she was obviously sharing her gospel with them as well. So she was a real good support, and the two of them, I don't know how they did it, but two of them were able to build this business, and they were able to educate us. We did not lack for anything. There might have been things we wanted that they didn't provide, but not because we needed it.
It was, if I don't have, and your mother does not have, do without. So in other words, don't ask anybody. He always stressed the importance of education.
When it came to providing for our education, all of us are fairly well educated, and my father would have made sure that that happened and supported us in whatever way he could have to ensure that we all have tertiary education, and not only first degrees, but all of us have higher degrees in terms of our education. So that was something very important to him.
And the importance of not wasting your money. I believe everyone over a certain age has gotten the lecture. My grandmother only had 2 dresses, one to wear to church, one to wear during the week. She only had 2 pairs of shoes. How many pairs of shoes can you wear? You only have 1 set of feet, that type of thing. So those are some of the memories I have.
My father was very, very wise. He would make statements that you didn't understand at that point, but years later you were like, okay, that's the reason why he was telling me that. I remember he always used to, if he saw a nail, either the side of the road or any place, he would pick it up and say, this is $5. And we used to sell nails, and he was trying to comprehend why a 5-cent nail is $5. So I never understood. And then one day, he had a flat tire with a nail. And he said that this nail cost me $5. And then he realized that, okay, so there are things that he did or taught me that it went over my head at that point. But then years later, it made me realize, okay, you know, there are reasons for this here. He was a handyman, so he did everything, more or less from plumbing, did a little piece of masonry, and he encouraged me to do it, some work with the car. I didn't do it then, and now I regret, because then I have to pay to do all of those things when I could have been taught. So he was one of those persons who was dabbled in a lot of things. He loved building. That's one of his passions that he has passed on to me, love for building things, architecture, like that there.
The other thing, if I talk about the legacy they've left, they also were strong Christians, and not only Christians at home, and so we had things like devotions every morning for several years, and they were Christians at home just as they were in the store, just as they were in the church.
Went to church here in Spikestown, and that church was started in 1962. From the time I was born, we went there, and it's sold. The building is sold now, but the church is still located in Spikestown, and I still go there.
And in the church, they give a lot of years of service. My father was a treasurer for many, many years. My mother, Sunday school superintendent. I mean, there are so many people in Spikestown that could vouch for something they said to them, some encouragement they did, or anything they would have provided for them in some way or another. So, I mean, it is a real, I always say, and I tell that to my children, the best thing is to have a name, a good legacy, and for sure we have that foundation.
The importance of a good legacy and that firm foundation. Now, Spikestown is known for natural disaster, namely flooding. Like other businesses in the town, Jemmott's Variety was a victim of these disasters, flooding. But in that indomitable spirit and on every occasion, it rose again to serve the people.
When I was growing up, the store, if you look at it, it would have been where Big Apple Fashion is. That would have been the main entrance to the store, and it would have just gone straight back. It would have been fairly small. And over the years, he expanded and went across where now Things Gospel is now. And when the flood happened in '84, and it literally came maybe about 4 or 5 feet within the store. We had recently bought, my mom said that they had bought a set of chicken, a whole set, and the freezer was full. And it lifted the entire freezer up and threw it upside down. So it is one of those cases where we lost a whole set of items because everything was more or less, you had to just throw away everything at that point. So the loss was really bad. I remember, I think it would have been in '84, well, they had the flood. One of the buildings, a wooden building, was lifted up from its foundation and placed in the center of the road, center of Church Street. And I remember there's one case of, I think, when we had our vehicle and the water was coming down, that we had to tie our vehicle onto a post by the church so that the water wouldn't carry it away. And these are things that just jump out at you because it shows you what nature can do, and it shows that sometimes that with Spikestown, you were almost getting a mixed bag. And there were several floods over the years. I would say maybe about 3 or 4 times when water came into the building, maybe about 3 feet high. And when you think of it logically, it doesn't make sense of water at the bottom of Church Street next to the sea at that level. But it's one of those cases where we saw what water can do.
And then after one of the floods, and my father built it up and expanded it over to the other side.
So that's why if you go in the mall, you'll see the ramp, because then the back of it is higher, because he said, all right, he'll want the back higher so that in case that there's another flood or anything like it, it wouldn't cause as much damage. After he had expanded, and there was quite a large space that we were using, and we had a whole range of items, so anything that you could want, you could come to Jemmott's Variety Store and you were sure that you would be able to get practically everything you need.
And obviously at that time we had more employees, and I mean it was a budding business. What obviously the changes that happened in Spikestown around that time then was that people were starting to buy in bulk, and it was important that you bought in bulk to be able to bring down your costs, and therefore my father would have worked with Clifford Jordan to buy things in bulk so that they could bring down the cost so that they could be sustainable.
And as my parents got older, then it was like, what is going to happen? They're going to pass it on? Honestly, my father would have loved to pass it on to one of us, but we were looking in different areas. And over time, we reduced the size of the space. We rented it out. And so at this point there, we have about 8 or 9 tenants in the space. So it's one of those cases where still in business, but looking at a different slant. And I guess the entrepreneurial spirit that he poured into me is still very evident, because I've started a music school, Notes of Praise, and I'm very, very interested in entrepreneurship and seeing entrepreneurs develop. And that's one thing that I love to see young business persons go and develop and reach their full potential.
I really hope that one day Spikestown does revive itself. I started to be a little bit encouraged when a few years ago they started on a Sunday afternoon. There were quite a few restaurants around that side, and on Sunday afternoons you would see people in Spikestown coming in Spikestown. I said, you know, maybe this is the beginning of something in Spikestown. Now it hasn't been sustained, but I look forward to the day when Spikestown gets back its vibrancy and we see a lot more happening in Spikestown.
Our people, the story of the late Vallis Jemmott and his business as told by his 3 children. Now, it has often been said that telling our stories of life's experiences was the first opportunity for our people to represent themselves as anything other than property. A movement without storytelling is like birds without wings. Telling stories is one of the more powerful means that we may teach, inspire, forge connections among people, between people and ideas, and convey the culture, history, and values that unite us all. Thank you, Debbie, Dawn, and Vallis. You have inspired us. I'm Sherwood McCaskey. Thanks for your time.